been here? I asked Aaron. He shrugged. About 2 years, I guess. I tried offing myself in 13. But time's weird here. It passes differently. A day could seem like a week could seem like a day. He pointed to Nadine. Little Miss Friendly's been here the longest. 8 years. Fuck you, Aaron, she grumbled. Aaron ignored her. Tourists, that's what we call us, the living, come all the time, but most of them are dead before they even realize what's going on. The residents, that's what we call the dead folks, see to that. That's if they're lucky enough to show up here during the day. If they wind up here after dark, he trailed off. What do they do? Eat them? I asked. He laughed without much humor. You've seen too many movies. No, they're not cannibals. They don't eat us. They kill us because they hate us. That's all, pure and simple. Why? Who knows? Maybe they see us as intruders. Or maybe they're jealous because we're still alive and they're not. Have you ever tried to communicate with them? I asked. He shook his head. They don't have a whole lot to say. They're not very bright, and they're pretty single-minded. But they can be pretty damn clever, too. Watch your ass if you're going to wander around Deadland. You never know when you're going to fall into a trap. You're just lucky I happened to be heading out to scavenge for supplies and ran into you. I shuddered. Then a thought came to mind. You shot that one and it died. It melted. Yeah, they can be killed, but there's a fuck of a lot more of them than there are of us. But if they're already dead, and this is the land of the dead, where the fuck do they go after you kill them? He shrugged. Who the fuck knows? Detroit? Like Nadine said, none of us really have any answers. So what's the plan? What do we do? I asked, looking around at my new friends. The plan is to stay alive as long as possible, Nadine answered flatly. That's it? I said. You got a better idea? Dante asked. I didn't. I looked at Aaron. You said living people like us show up all the time. Have any of them ever escaped from Deadland? Escaped how? Like, gone back to the land of the living? Not that I know of. Most of them are pretty bad off in the normal world, folks like us. Brain dead, paralyzed, terminally ill. People who are only alive because they're on life support and their families can't bring themselves to pull the plug. And when they do die, when someone does pull the plug, I already had an idea what the answer was going to be. They turn into residents. Then they go after us. It doesn't matter how well they knew us or how close we were while they were alive. They see us as the enemy. It goes both ways, too, Clark added. What do you mean? I asked. If you die here, you die in the living world. I took a moment to absorb this all. So what? We're just stuck here until we die in the real world, or those things catch us? That's about the size of it, Jeff muttered. And when we die? I couldn't finish. No one said anything for a while. A thought occurred to me. What about food? What do we eat? Aaron seemed amused by my question. Are you feeling hungry? He asked me. No, I said. Now that I think about it, I'm really not. And it was true. Even though I hadn't eaten since that morning, when I had still been a normal teenager existing in the sane, bright living world. I wasn't thirsty either. Tourists don't have to eat or drink in Deadland, Aaron explained. We don't sleep either. So on the bright side, we don't have to worry about starving. The unconscious young girl on the cot, Lauren, groaned again. What about her? I said to Aaron. You just said we don't sleep. She's not sleeping. She's dying in the real world. The closer you get to death there, the closer you get here. What's her story? I asked. She was in a house fire, Nadine explained with uncharacteristic softness. She gently wiped sweat off Lauren's brow with a cloth. My guess is she got burned pretty badly and is probably in a medically induced coma to keep her from feeling the pain. She's only been here for about a week. What feels like a week, anyway. Is there anything we can do for her? I asked. Nadine looked at me gravely. She reached behind her and pulled a handgun from the back of her jeans. She held it up for me to see. We can put her out of her misery. She'll die on the other side, or we can wait for her to die there and then shoot her to keep her from turning. Those are our only options. Jesus, I whispered. She laughed humorlessly. Who's that? In case you haven't been paying attention, kid, Jesus ain't gonna help us. He isn't even real. I looked at Aaron. I eyed the shotgun he was holding. Then I looked back to the handgun Nadine had. Where'd you get the guns? Right here, Aaron replied. The station armory? There's not much ammo left, though. That's one of the things I was going out to search for when we bumped into each other. Those things know we're holed up in here? Yeah, but don't worry about them. This place is like a fortress. All the windows are barred on the outside. They can't get in. Why don't they try to burn the station down? Like I said, they're not too bright. Or maybe they're afraid of fire. He paused. His face turned to a look of concern. I'm worried about the sewers, though. Why? That's how we've been able to move around the town to gather supplies without them detecting us. That mob that was chasing you saw us duck down there. They might be waiting for us next time we go out. What do we really need so bad we have to go out at all? You said we don't need food or water. Clark answered for him. Ammo for one thing. Like Aaron said before. Also gasoline, if there's any to be found. There's an emergency generator in the parking garage, but it needs juice. If we can get it going, we can have electricity and we won't need all these fucking candles and lanterns to see. Yeah, we're getting low on candles too, Nadine added. And kerosene for the lanterns, Dante said with a strange sense of urgency in his voice. Aaron glanced out one of the barred windows. The light had dimmed outside. It's too late to worry about that today. It's getting dark. It's too dangerous to go out in the dark. We'll try for a supply run tomorrow. Wouldn't it make more sense to sneak out after dark when it'd be harder for those things to see us? I asked. Aaron shuddered in response to my question. For a brief second, a flash of fear crossed his face. It's not those zombies outside that you have to worry about after dark. What the fuck are you talking about? I demanded. Clark sighed and looked at me. There's something we didn't tell you before, kid. I guess we were saving the worst for last. What? I asked fearfully. I remembered something Aaron had said earlier. Tourists come all the time, but most of them are dead before they even realize what's going on. The residents see to that. That's if they're lucky enough to show up here during the day. If they wind up here after dark. Those walking corpses aren't the only thing out there, Aaron said. They're bad enough, but after it gets dark, you also have to watch out for the shadow lurkers. Shadow lurkers? I asked, already not liking the sound of it. What are those? We're not really sure, Aaron said. Maybe they're what those things become after you kill them. Maybe they were never human to begin with. Maybe they're demons. They only come out at night, Nadine said with a tremble of fear in her voice. They hide in the shadows. They're all over the place, watching us all the time, waiting for it to get dark. And then what? Then they take you, Clark said quietly. They come out of the shadows, and if they catch you in the dark, they take you. What the fuck do you mean, they take you? Jeff, who had been silent for some time, spoke up. There was a guy who showed up here around the same time I did, about 4 months ago. Dave. Seemed like an okay guy. I guess we were kind of buddies. We were out looking for supplies and got caught out after dark on the other side of town. It was stupid, really. We knew better. But I guess we weren't paying attention. We tried to hide from the residents down in the basement of the old Methodist church. We only had one flashlight with us, and the batteries were running low. We decided to make a break for it and try to get back here before they ran out completely. We ran up the stairs. Dave was right behind me, but he tripped and fell back down. Hurt his leg. I started down to help him, and I saw this thing come out of the darkness behind him. It was like a living wall of shadows, and it had eyes, glowing red eyes. I shined my light on Dave to try to protect him, but the beam was too weak, too dim. It fell over him, enveloped him, like a wave. He didn't even have time to scream. It was that quick. And then it receded back into the dark. And he was gone. Just gone. There wasn't a trace left of him. I stared at him, chilled to the bone by his story. I found my voice. Then what happened? I ran until I found a manhole and used the sewers to get back to the police station. The whole time my flashlight was getting dimmer and dimmer. I kept expecting it to go out any time and that same thing happened to Dave to happen to me. But I made it back. Just barely. Shadow lurkers never come out during the day, Aaron said. Even in places that are always dark, like sewers and basements. They need it to be truly dark. And they're scared of light sources. That's why we need candles and lanterns, Dante added. They keep them away during the night. But we're running low, Clark said grimly. And it's getting harder to find more around town. Supplies are dwindling. We have enough to get through tonight, if we're lucky. Nadine added. After that, she shrugged. Shit, I muttered. This town's pretty well picked clean, Aaron said. Tomorrow I'm going to try to head for the next town to find supplies. Aaron, no, it's too dangerous, Clark began to protest. It has to be done, Aaron cut him off. We need candles and batteries for the flashlights, and more ammunition. Maybe we can even find gas for the generator. The nearest town's 10 miles away, I said. How are you going to get there? Is there a car? No. All the cars are long dead. Besides, driving in a car would draw too much unwanted attention. I'll go on foot. It should only take a couple of hours both ways, plus another hour to stock up. He looked over the group. Any of you guys in? I'll come, Dante said immediately. Yeah, me too, I guess, Jeff said with some hesitation. Aaron looked at me. How about you, new meat? You up for some adventure tomorrow? Actually, no. I'd had all the adventure that day that I could stand for a lifetime, and I didn't want to leave the relative safety of the police station and venture back out into the hellish world outside. But Aaron had saved my life, and I didn't want to turn my back on him and leave him and the others to go on a dangerous mission to gather supplies from the next town, a mission they might not come back from. I felt like I would be betraying him, so I forced myself to say, sure, why not? He nodded, pleased. Good. He looked out the window. It was dark now. I could still hear the living dead moaning outside. It's getting late, so let's try to get some sleep. I thought you said we didn't need to sleep in Deadland, I pointed out. We don't, Nadine explained. But if we try hard enough, we can doze off for a while. It helps pass the time and take our minds off all of this. Whose turn is it to stand guard? Clark asked the group. Jeff went last night, so it's Dante's turn, Aaron said. Dante nodded and Aaron handed him a shotgun. If she, Aaron indicated Lauren, dies while we're asleep, you know what to do. Dante nodded somberly. A pained look came over Nadine's face at this exchange, but she didn't say anything. She stroked the unconscious girl's face gently, brushed back her hair, and whispered something into her ear. Then she lay down on the cot next to her and closed her eyes. The rest of us, except Dante, did the same. Dante stood vigilantly beside the door of the police chief's office, holding the shotgun. I lay down on the cot, closed my eyes, and tried to doze. My mind felt like an overloaded computer trying to process everything that had happened to me that day. I still couldn't fully believe this was all actually happening. Eventually, I managed to fade away into a state of half sleep. I woke up sometime later. I sat up and looked around, confused. I was alone in the police chief's office. All the other cots were empty, and the light was too dim. I looked over and saw a single candle flickering on the desk, the only one still burning. The rest had gone out while I had been dozing. The candle was burned down all the way to the bottom, producing only a feeble glow of illumination, its flame sputtering weakly. As I watched, my heart racing, it went out with a hiss, casting the room into darkness. I heard an ungodly roar that seemed to come from all around me, from above and below. I jerked my head up and saw dozens, no hundreds, of glowing, malevolent red eyes glaring at me from the blackness of the ceiling. I opened my mouth to scream, but the blackness fell upon me like a sheet before I could utter a sound. I opened my eyes and screamed. I looked around, my heart thudding in my chest. I was surprised to see I was back in my own bedroom at home. I tried to get my wildly beating heart under control and catch my breath. An enormous wave of relief overwhelmed me. It had all just been a nightmare. The worst fucking nightmare I had had in my life. I thought I might actually break down in tears for a second. A familiar voice spoke from outside my door. Honey, are you all right? Before I could answer, my door opened, and my mother wearing her robe stepped in and turned on my light. She looked at me with an expression of concern. I heard you scream. I had never been so glad to see her. I found my voice. I'm okay, Mom. Just had a bad dream, that's all. She came over and placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You feel better now? Yeah, a lot better. I'm afraid I have some bad news for you, she told me with a voice of sad regret. I looked at her, puzzled. What, Mom? She looked at me. As I watched, her skin shriveled, pulling tightly to her skull, her lips drawing back from her teeth, transforming her mouth into a hideous rictus grin. Her nose rotted away before my eyes, leaving only a gaping nasal cavity. Her eyes sank into her skull, leaving only hollow black sockets. This all happened in less than 2 seconds. The desiccated, decayed cadaver that had been my mother loomed above me. It spoke, his voice a horrible guttural rasp. "You're still dreaming." It leaped on top of me, and I sat up with a gasp, my eyes darting around frantically. I was on my cot in the police chief's office, the others curled up on their cots around me. The candles were all still burning. I sat there, feeling paranoid, wondering if I was really awake this time. "Bad dream?" a voice asked, startling me. I looked over and saw Dante leaning against the far wall, the shotgun standing beside his leg. "Yeah, the worst," I told him, brushing my hair back with a trembling hand. "Yeah, we all have them once in a while. Weird, ain't it? If you think about it, we're already asleep in the real world. It's like we're dreaming inside a dream. That makes sense?" "Yeah, I guess so," I replied, then shrugged. "Or not. I don't know anymore." Dante looked away from me, seeming to stare off into space. Nothing makes much sense around here. I keep trying to tell myself this whole fucking thing is just some long-ass nightmare, and sooner or later I'm gonna wake up. But it never happens. "Well, if it makes you feel better, you're not alone," I told him. I took out my phone to check the time, but the battery had died while I had been dozing. "Hey, Dante, what time is it?" He shrugged. "Who the fuck knows? Like Aaron said, time's fucked up here. I only feel like I've been standing here for like 5 minutes, but look." He gestured toward the window. I looked and saw murky gray light outside. Daylight. "Well, at least the sun's up," I said, then added, "Well, sort of." "I can't even remember the last time I saw actual sunlight," Dante told me with a look of sad longing. "Every day here's the same. Gray, dull, dead." The others began to stir. One by one they began to awaken. They came fully awake the moment their eyes opened, like a switch had been flipped. None of them yawned or seemed groggy. Aaron saw the daylight outside. "Well, we got through another night anyway," he offered as if it was some consolation. Nadine immediately got up to check on Lauren. She looked worse than she had the night before. Her skin was whitish gray and her breathing was very weak. "I don't think she's going to last," Nadine began. Lauren suddenly gasped and jerked violently. She jerked again, then went still. She stopped breathing. "Oh, God," Clark said softly. "She's gone, isn't she?" The sound of Aaron racking the slide on his shotgun. I spun around to him. He raised the shotgun in Lauren's direction, his face grave, but determined. "Nadine, get away from her. You know what has to be done." Nadine stepped protectively in front of the dead girl's body, between her and Aaron's shotgun, shielding her. "No! Stay away from her!" "You knew this was coming, Nadine. She's going to turn. You're not touching her, Aaron. No one is." Nadine pulled her handgun from the back of her jeans and aimed it at Aaron. "I'll kill anyone who does." In response to Nadine pulling her gun on Aaron, Clark aimed his shotgun at her. "Put the gun down, Nadine. Don't make this any worse than it already is." "Shut up, Clark," Nadine yelled at him without taking her eyes off Aaron. "Aaron, if you shoot her, so help me, I'll fucking—" "She's turning!" Jeff screamed in a panicky voice and pointed to Lauren's cot. I had been distracted by the ongoing standoff, but now I turned my eyes to Lauren's body and saw it was beginning to twitch. Her fingers were starting to move. Her eyelids began to flutter. "Oh shit," Dante said in a voice barely above a whisper. "Everybody, get back," Aaron yelled. "Don't get too close to her." I recoiled several feet, my mind feeling dazed, reality seeming to float away from me. I felt like I was witnessing a scene from a horror movie, from the perspective of one of the characters. Lauren sat up violently on the cot, emitting a hideous howl of inhuman rage. Her eyes opened. They were dead white. We looked at her, our eyes wide in shock. "Jesus Christ," Clark moaned. "Hate life. Hate living." The thing that had been Lauren shrieked. "Hate life. Hate living." She lunged in the direction of the person closest to her, Nadine. Nadine spun towards her, aiming her handgun away from Aaron and pointing it in Lauren's face as she pounced on her. She shot her point blank in the forehead. Blood and brain matter exploded from the back of Lauren's head as she tumbled to the floor, lying there motionless for a few seconds, before her body dissolved into black slime which immediately evaporated. All that remained were her clothes. The gun fell from Nadine's hand, falling to the floor with a clunk. She stood there, motionless, like a statue, her face blank. Then, very softly, she began to weep. She lowered her head, her shoulders shuddering. Aaron started to step towards her as if to comfort her, but she pointed her finger at him and said sharply, "No!" She looked around the room at the rest of us, her eyes still wet with tears but cold and steely. "Stay away from me. All of you. Just leave me alone." She marched out of the office, slamming the door behind her. I could still hear her sobbing in the corridor. We stood there, looking around at each other. Me, Clark, Dante, Jeff, Aaron. Then we lowered our heads and looked at Lauren's empty clothes on the floor, standing like mourners gathered around a grave. Nadine came back in about 20 minutes later. She had stopped crying and was composed, her icy standoffish facade back in place. Her eyes were still red, but her voice was even, and she spoke with hard resolve. "All right," she said, sitting down in her cot angrily. "She's dead, and it's over with." She flashed us a glare, and her voice turned hostile. "Don't any of you fucking tell me you're sorry. It won't change a goddamn thing." She looked down, glowering at the floor. A moment of silence passed. I broke it, turning to Aaron. "So when do we head out?" "The sooner the better," he told me. "We don't know how much daylight we have to work with. Sometimes it goes fast and sometimes it seems to stretch out for days. We've got to keep an eye on the sky." "Let's take inventory first," Clark said. "See how well we're stocked right now." It only took a few minutes. We were down to 2.5 candles and 1/2 full kerosene lantern. "Now let's check our ammo situation," Aaron said. Everyone unloaded their guns and we tallied up the ammunition on the police chief's desk. There were 18 shotgun shells, 29 .45 ACPs, and 36 9mm. "Not much, but it's going to have to do," Aaron said as they reloaded their weapons. He surprised me by handing me a 9mm Beretta. "You think you can handle that?" "I think so," I replied, turning the pistol over in my hands. "Ever fire a gun before?" Dante asked me. "No, but I played a lot of video games." "The safety's on the side," Aaron pointed. "When you see that red dot, that means you're good to go. It'll kick like crazy when you pull the trigger. Make sure you've got a good grip on it or it'll fly out of your hand. It'll make a fuck of a loud noise too. Be warned." "Let's get going," Dante said. Aaron turned to Nadine. "Keep an eye on things while we're gone." She nodded. "Watch your asses out there." Clark lit the lantern with the match and picked it up. We followed him out of the office and took the stairs back down to the underground garage. Clark pushed the wheelbarrow full of cinder blocks off the manhole cover, then used a crowbar to pull it up. Aaron shined his flashlight down into the sewer tunnel. He motioned for us to be quiet and listened intently. I heard nothing but silence. "Wait up here for a minute," he whispered to the rest of us and descended the ladder. He unslung his shotgun and aimed it around, holding his flashlight beneath it police style. A minute passed. Then he motioned up at us to follow him. One by one we climbed down into the sewer tunnel. Me, Jeff, Dante. We joined Aaron at the bottom. "It looks clear," he told us. "I was afraid some of them might have followed us down here after yesterday." He looked up at Clark and nodded at him. Clark looked down the manhole at us. "Good luck, guys," he said, then slid the manhole cover back in place. "Here, hold this for a minute," Aaron told me, handing me his flashlight. He took out an old, frayed, and creased sheet of paper, unfolding it and holding it against the sewer wall. It was a schematic of the sewer system that ran beneath the town. A red X he had drawn marked the location of the entrance beneath the police station. He studied the map carefully, tracing his fingers along it. "The sewers run all the way to the edge of town," he said. "That's only a couple miles away. From there we can take the highway on foot to the next town, 10 miles. "Why not just go into the city?" I asked. "That's a fuck of a lot closer." The nearest city was only 5 miles out of town the opposite direction. He shook his head. "Way too dangerous. A lot of dead folks, more than we can handle. Safer to avoid heavily populated areas and stick to smaller towns." He put away the map. "Let's get moving." We followed him down the sewer. He seemed to know the layout pretty well. We made several turns. Some of the tunnels seemed to be as wide as an airplane hangar. Others were so narrow we had to go through them single file. I don't know how much time passed, half an hour maybe, but eventually we came to a dead end. There was a ladder leading up. Aaron took out the map and looked at it again. "This should be it," he said. He climbed the rungs to the top and forced the heavy iron manhole cover up with his shoulders. He scooted it aside. I could see a disk of dismal gray daylight above. He climbed out and looked around. He looked down at us. Looks good. Come up. I climbed up to the top and Aaron took my hand, helping me out. I looked around as Dante and Jeff climbed up after me. We were in the middle of the highway on the outskirts of town. Open farmland surrounded us. In the normal world, it was late summer and the crops had already been coming in pretty good. Here, like everything else, they were long dead and rotted. I looked again, creeped out once more by the barren, desolate, lifeless world around me. Even the trees were dead, their branches bare, as if it were late fall instead of July. There were none of those living corpses in sight. Dante and Jeff climbed out onto the highway, then Aaron slid the manhole cover back in place. He took a can of orange spray paint out of his jacket and painted a large X on the road beside it, presumably so we could find it on the way back. Let's get moving, he told us. Keep your eyes open and watch your backs. We started walking in the direction of the next town. Aaron was in the lead, shotgun in hand, constantly stopping to scan our surroundings for any sign of trouble, using a pair of binoculars he had brought along. I was walking behind him with Dante, and Jeff was behind us. None of us spoke as we walked. An hour maybe passed. I had walked several miles by then, but I realized I didn't feel dehydrated or thirsty, and I wasn't sweating. To break the silence, I decided to make small talk with Dante beside me. I turned to him. Nadine was pretty protective of Lauren, wasn't she? I said in a low voice. Yeah, she liked the kid, even though she wasn't with us for very long. They were close. He paused and looked at me. Don't tell Nadine I told you this, or she'll fucking murder me. This is just between us, deal? Deal. Lauren reminded Nadine of her little sister. They had a pretty rough life, I guess. The dad was a real shitbag. He used to, loan them out, I guess you could say, to pay the rent money. Fuck, I whispered. Yeah, Nadine's sister killed herself when she was 13 and Nadine was 17. That's why she's so messed up, why she took Lauren's death so hard. I didn't know what to say. The silence resumed. We walked on. We were coming up on a farmhouse beside the road. It looked long deserted, but Aaron motioned for us to stop. He raised his binoculars to his eyes and studied the farmhouse for a couple minutes. I think I saw something moving around there. Residents? Jeff asked. What else? Aaron lowered his binoculars. We'll have to get off the road. It's too dangerous to pass that house. It's too close. Fuck, Dante muttered. What are we going to do? I asked. We'll duck into the field, Aaron said, pointing to our left. Circumvent the house, come back on the road after we clear it. We have guns, I pointed out. Why not just shoot them? We don't know how many could be in there, he said, and our ammo is limited. If they see us, they'll follow us into town. We stepped off the road, crouching low and slipping into the field, moving low through the rotted corn stalks. We hadn't gone more than a few feet before Aaron halted, motioning for silence. We stopped, listened. You hear that? Aaron whispered to us. I listened and heard something. I couldn't believe it. It was a human voice, calling from off in the distance. I couldn't make out what it was saying at first, but it gradually got louder as whoever it was got closer. A man's voice calling out repeatedly. Hello? Is there anyone there? Hello? Jesus, Jeff whispered. Someone else is out here. Aaron peered through the stalks and raised his binoculars. Someone's coming down the road, he told us. Who? I asked. Some guy. Looks like he hasn't been here for long. Fresh meat. Let me see, I said. He handed over his binoculars and I looked through them. Through the magnified lenses, I could see the figure of a man walking down the highway, coming from the direction we were heading in. He looked middle-aged and was wearing a suit and tie. His clothes, while somewhat rumpled, still looked relatively clean. He was looking around wildly, disoriented and alarmed, calling out over and over, with desperation. Hello, please, is anyone around? I need help. I've been in a car accident. I can't find my wife. What are we going to do? I whispered to Aaron. Aaron shrugged, his face grim. Nothing we can do. We have to help him. We can't leave him out there. He doesn't know what's going on. We can't help him, he told me shortly. It's too risky. If we break our cover, we risk being spotted. I started to protest, but Dante cut me off. He's right, kid. Even if we tried to warn him, he wouldn't understand what's going on. And if we tried to explain, he'd think we're crazy. dude's a goner. I turned back to the road, watching helplessly, feeling sick. The man was approaching the farmhouse. A figure appeared in the doorway, drawn by his voice. I couldn't distinguish any of its features at this distance, until I raised the binoculars and saw its empty black eye sockets and decaying face. The man spotted the figure in the doorway. He began running towards it, a note of relief in his voice. "Oh, thank God. Hey, please, need help. I've been in an accident. Do you think you can—" It wasn't until he was almost upon the figure that he saw it for the horrible, decomposed mockery of a human being it was. He froze in his tracks, quivering with shock and horror. He began to back away, but it was already too late. The corpse pounced upon him, pulling him to the ground. Other corpses began to emerge from the farmhouse behind it, at least half a dozen, all of them shouting that familiar mantra. "Hate life! Hate living! Hate life! Hate living!" The others looked away, Aaron staring down at the ground, but I watched. The man screamed wildly and struggled as they grabbed a hold of him and began to tear him apart, limb from limb. He screamed right up until they twisted his head off his shoulders. They hoisted his body parts up to the sky victoriously, like gruesome trophies. I turned away, feeling nauseous. "Let's keep going," Aaron said. We moved on.